In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the oil pressure sensor in this Ford 500. Let's get into it. I'm going to remove the hubcap. I'm just using a pry bar. Just get behind it, pop the hubcap off. Use a 19mm socket, take the lug nuts off. We're going to remove this shield. There's a couple of push pins. Just use a trim tool. Pop these out. One up here. This one has the center of a Phillips screwdriver. Sometimes if you get the center of it, just pop it out. Pop the whole thing out. Just like that. A couple more on the bottom. And this slides right off. We're going to remove these 3 screws. Use a Phillips head screwdriver. Take those off. Take these 2 push pins out. Just use a trim tool. Just get under the center of that. Pop those out. There's another one up here. If you want to take the rest of it out, you can, but you don't need to. Just grab the inner fender well. And just slide this out of the way. That's out of the way. And we're going to take the serpentine belt off. I'm just going to use a 3/8 ratchet. Get on the tensioner. There is a spot, a little square the ratchet can go in. Or if you have a belt tensioner tool, you can use that. Loosen up the tension on the belt. Just slide it off one of the pulleys. You can take your ratchet off. Take the belt off the compressor pulley. And just set it to the side. We're going to remove this shield. There's some push pins right here. Take those out. The center has a little screwdriver bit. You can use a Phillips head screwdriver. Try to get that out, if that works. Sometimes you just got to pop it off. Using a trim tool. There's 3 screws in the front. Use an 8mm socket. Take those out. Slides right off. Under the hood, we're going to remove the coolant radiator fans. Disconnect the connector right here for the O2 sensor. Just put that aside. Disconnect the connector for the fan. Just push down on the tab. Slide that off. Using a trim tool, we're just going to pop these retainers off for the coolant hose. On the 2 sides of the fan, I'm going to take these bolts out, use an 8mm socket. To get the bolt out on the other side, it's going to be easier for us to remove the air box, so we're going to do that. If you can access that without doing it, go ahead and do that. Using an 8mm socket, take this screw out. disconnect the connector, just pull up on that lock tab and push down on the tab. Slide that off, out of the way. We're going to loosen up this worm clamp right here. I'm going to use the same 8mm socket, or you could use a straight blade screwdriver. Slide the snorkel off, pull these two clips off, and slide the top part of the box off. You can take the air filter out and just grab the box and just tug it straight up. There's two push pins that are going into some grommets. Now we can access that bolt, use the same 8mm socket. Slide that out and just twist it up. Just make sure the hoses aren't in the way. And it comes right out. Now we're going to loosen up some of these compressor bolts that are attached to the bracket. Use a 13mm socket. Take that out. Just be careful of the radiator. You don't want to stab the radiator. Where this wire goes, there's a retainer that holds that on. I'm just going to use a trim tool. Just pop this off. There's a little stud. Slide that off and out of the way. Now we can get to where the stud and the nut is, and loosen that up. Using a 13mm socket, loosen that up. And slide that stud out. Again, be careful of the radiator. There's a hose right here, lower coolant hose. You want to pop that up out of your way. You can just use a trim tool and just pop this up. Just move it out slightly. We can access that bolt at the base of the compressor. Use a 13mm socket. Loosen that bolt. Slide that bolt out. Do the same on the stud. 13mm socket. Take that nut out. To make it easier, I'm going to remove this stud. I'm going to use a 5.5mm socket. Pull that stud out. You can move the compressor back a little bit. Out of the way. On this bracket, we're going to remove this connector. I'm just going to use a trim tool. Just pry that connector off and out of the way. Take these two lower bolts out for this bracket. Use a 10mm socket. Further up the bracket, about halfway, there's another bolt. You're going to use a 10mm socket. Pull that one out. Coming from the top, we're going to take this bolt out on the bracket. There's a 10mm socket. And take that bolt out. Using a 13mm socket, take this bolt out. Take this bolt out right here, use a 10mm socket. Just grab the bracket, slide it down, out of the way. This is where the oil pressure sensor is. We're going to disconnect the connector. Just push down on the tab. Using a 21mm wrench, I'm going to loosen this up. You could also use a socket if you wanted to. Take that out. You might want a drain bucket underneath in case you lose some oil. Take the pressure sensor, the new one, slide it in position, and tighten that down. If you can get a torque wrench in there, you want to torque that to 10 foot-pounds. Take the connector, line it up, and lock it down. Take the bracket, slide the bracket back in place, and get some of the bolts started. There is an alignment tab on this bracket, so as long as that's lined up, I'm going to tighten this one down. Just snug that up. We'll tighten the other ones later. Up top, put the other two bolts in. This is the bigger one. And put the smaller 10mm bolt in. Once those are in, now I'm going to tighten that one up. Snug that down. Now that all the bolts are in, we'll tighten all these down. Tighten these up underneath. Just gonna go back with the ratchet and make sure these are all snugged up. Yep, those are all good. This connector and retainer, just slide that back in that hole, right there. Take the compressor, line it up, put it back in that bracket. There is some alignment pins, line those up. Now I take the stud, line that up, get that started there. Snug that down, take the nut, put that on the stud. Lower compressor bolt, get that started. Now I'm going to torque these to 18 foot-pounds. From up top, now we're going to get the upper compressor, the stud first. And then the bolt, and we'll tighten those down. Now torque these to 18 foot-pounds. I'm going to take the wire and push that over the stud, just like that. Slide the fans back in position. Just make sure the coolant hose is out of the way. There's two clips down below that the fan should slide into. Put the screws in. Snug those down. Tighten those both down. That's good. Connect the wires. Lock it down. Take the other wire. Connect that connector. Lock that down. The coolant hose, you're going to make sure the retainers get pushed in. Right there. And right there. That's good. Take the air box, make sure these tabs are going to go into the grommets. Line those up and push it down. Take the air filter, slide that in place. The upper part of the airbox. Line everything up. Line the tabs in. Lock the clips down. Put the screw in. Tighten it down. Tighten down the worm clamp. Snug. Connector, line that up. Lock it down, push down on the lock. Where the coolant pipe is, if you push this up, you want to pull that back in position. Just those retainers holding that up. Just push those back down. Take the serpentine belt, go over the compressor. Making sure the rest of it is lined up. Bring it close to the alternator. I'm going to use my ratchet, put it back on the tensioner, and slide the belt back over the alternator. That's good. Make sure it's around all the pulleys. And take your tool off. Slide this cover in place. Get the bolts started. And now we're going to do the push pins. Before we tighten the bolts down, push the push pins in, lock those down. And tighten the bolts down. Snug those down. Reposition the inner fender well. Push it back in place. Put the push pins in. Lock those down. Take this cover. We're going to line this up. Push the push pins in. And down below. Put the wheel on. Put the lug nuts on. Now I'm going to torque the lug nuts to 95 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. Just go around again, double check. Take the hubcap, line it up, and pop it on.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.